everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leaders Podcast. Leaders Podcast gives me the opportunity to speak to well-renowned industry leaders from all over the world. I'm put in this unique position where I speak and talk and listen to other leaders' journeys, and they share their insights and their knowledge with the world of international investigations and intelligence. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Steven Kirby, who's the Executive Director of CII, which is the Council of International Investigations. Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me. I look forward to our conversations. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Steve Kirby. I'm based in Chicago, Illinois, and I've been a licensed private investigator since 1975. So that's 50 years. I'd like to say that I started when I was 12, but that would belie my age. So, but I did start at a pretty young age because I was in a family business and was able to do so. Once I got licensed in Illinois, subsequently I was licensed in Indiana and Wisconsin. So I was licensed in 3 states. And in 1976, I undertook examinations and became a licensed polygraph examiner, which would be a person that would run what's commonly known as a lie detector test. I worked full-time with a firm in Chicago area, our own family firm, eventually run by my brother and myself. And then I full-time retired in about 2014, about 10 years ago. I still continue to do some work. I don't think you ever can get out of this business. And at about the same time, I was asked to take over as the executive director of the Council of International Investigators, and I did that. And so that's where we are today.
Fantastic. 50 years of investigating. I bet you've seen some changes, right? From when you first started to the way it works now.
Absolutely. I was kind of fortunate to start in the 70s because it was sort of the 70s were kind of the tail end of the old Wild West days, going back to the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, where anything went. You could pretty much, there were no rules or there were some licensing factors, but really we flew under the radar. There were no rules and regulations. There were no privacy laws. You could kind of, and again, as it got into the 70s, that was still to a degree, a lot of that you could do. You could rely on contacts within the police department to give you information without any blowback. You could call some people up that you might have known from associations to get information. It was a profession that relied a lot on who you knew. We like to say it's not what you know, but who you know. Or another way we used to say is, if you want to know something, ask somebody that knows, and they'll tell you. Hopefully they'll tell you. And so it was a lot of making friendships, and you'd make these friendships at a bar at night, going out to dinner with these guys, and it was a lot. It was, today investigations is a lot more technologically involved with OSINT sources and that type of thing. And the old days of calling up a local friendly policeman and getting a criminal record check on somebody or this type of thing, you can't do that anymore because of privacy rules and regulations and that type of thing. So it's transitioned to a degree from a less of a people to people way to get information. However, if you're going to be successful in the business, despite all the technological stuff, you really still need to know how to talk to people.
Oh, completely. What were associations back then, Steve, 50 years ago? How was the dynamic? Is it the same as it is now, or were they different?
I joined the CII in 1983 or something like that. And then I really wasn't too active until a few years later. In the 90s, I became a little more active in it. And it's changed to some degree. It is interesting because as people get older and retire, they move, out of the business, and there's no reason for them to remain in the association. So the people that I knew in the CII in the 1980s, there's a few of us are still around, but we're the old time. When in the 80s we were the kids that nobody that the older people didn't really acknowledge all that much, So we cooked, hung out with our own people and made these contacts have lasted through the years now with people like Brian King of Canada and Norm Willocks in the United States and that. It's actually been kind of fun to watch their success that are still in there. So, but the people that are now running the CII are in their 30s and 40s, and which is a good thing.
Yeah, completely. And the benefits of connecting with other professionals around the world, right? The associations give you that platform in order for you to do that. And without those associations, it's difficult to form trusted relationships with other investigators, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I always try to tell people that join the CII that if you don't leverage your membership by going to some of the meetings, you're missing the point of it all. Now, I realize that for a variety of reasons, financial, the press of business, that you can't make all these meetings at all the time. But if you can make them every so often, then you become more than just a name in we used to say a name in a book, but we don't publish a book roster anymore. So I guess it would be a name on the website. Once you become known and you can talk to people, like I used to say that if you meet somebody at at a conference, I can pretty much tell. I was able to tell within 10 minutes of talking to the person if they knew what they were talking about or if they were just a BSer. And so you get to know them, and then you get to trust them to handle some pretty sensitive information for some important clients.
Yeah, exactly. They're an extension to your own team, right? So you've got to make sure you're choosing the right people.
Exactly. And then they know the laws. They know what you can and what you can't do. And even if you have to go over there to that foreign country to help do the work in some respects, or at least be there when the work is being done by your associates, it can be just incredibly helpful. For me to go to Delhi, India, and expect to do a surveillance is just preposterous. It's not going to happen. Certainly not going to happen successfully. Plus, in certain community or areas, for example, like you were to come to Illinois and do an investigation without affiliating yourself with someone, you could get all the information tossed out of court because you weren't licensed to do the investigation. So at times I've been to Australia. I've done investigations in 7 or 8 foreign countries: Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Canada, Haiti, the Bahamas, Brazil. Those are at least ones that I can remember off the top of my head. And in each case that I went down there, I hired a local person, mostly from CII, to help me get around, help me navigate the pitfalls, in some cases translate, and that type of thing. And it was all extremely successful. They all worked out well because of the help of those other people that I met through these associations.
Oh, completely. Local knowledge, local expertise. You need that, especially if you're working in a foreign jurisdiction, right? Navigating those laws, licensing, and all of the other issues, even the cultural and ethical differences that you get in different jurisdictions. Yeah. So what made you decide to step up and give your time back? Because then you took positions in the association. I take it on the board and ran for office and ran as executive director. Talk me through that, because a 50-year career is a long career as it is. And then deciding to give your time back, right? Because I know from my roles in associations, it's a lot of time you put in, but it's just done on a pro bono basis.
Well, as far as becoming an officer, my father was an officer in the council back in 1978, I believe.
Okay.
Well before I became a member. We actually hosted a conference in Chicago I want to think it was 1978, 77 or 78 or something like that. I just met my wife. I remember that. So that's how I'm placing the time of that conference. My dad asked me if I wanted to go to a conference. I wasn't a member yet, but as a guest it was in London, actually, back in, I think that was 83. Hey, a trip to London? Sure. Absolutely. So, and of course we transitioned it into a vacation. We went up to Scotland and after the conference and all over the UK. And so then I met these people and they were friendly and we they were nice, it was fun to talk to. And so got a chance to a little bit of travel plus and through, which I think is important too, because it really does broaden your horizons and makes you a smarter person, I think, which helps make you a better investigator. And then eventually a fellow by the name of Peter Tarrant, nominated me for the board, and I thought it was kind of an honor, so I took it. And once you get, as you know, well, no, Mike, once you get sucked into these things, they kind of take a life of their own. And I was president in the 90s for CII. I then, like a lot of people, after you've spent 6 or 7 years volunteering for these things, you kind of want to take a rest. So I sort of stepped back for a while. I would still go to the AGMs, but I really wasn't super active in the association. When I retired, they found out, some of the people in CII found out. And at the time, CII was using a management firm to run the association, and they weren't very happy with it. They didn't feel like they were getting kind of hands-on. So because of the background I had with the CII, they asked me if I would be interested in doing it. And I said I would, but to answer this kind of answers your other question. I said, I'm not going to volunteer to do the executive director position. You're going to have to pay me. Because I knew they were paying the other people. Plus, I knew if I volunteered, I'd get burned out in about a year and a half. But, if I'm getting paid, I'm going to do a good job. And it was nice because by that point, I had started to cut way back on my investigations. I believe investigations is for a large part, a younger person's game, because there's some physicality to it. It's just, that's what I think. But it kept me in touch with people that I like and I know from all over the world, and it's worked out well for me, and I'd like to think it's worked out well for CII.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's great. And CII is celebrating its 70th year this year. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, well, technically, we're going into our 70th. We had our 70th AGM last year because like your birthday, you had the first one. The inaugural one was in 1955. So we're into our 71st year, even though we probably didn't count it right from the start, but this will be our 71st annual general meeting this year. We're sort of 30 years behind the World Association of Detectives.
Tell us a little bit about the AGM then. When is it? What's involved?
They're typically in the fall. This year just happens to be in Chicago, so I'm helping with it. We have a big committee, but ours usually start out. We like to think ours are really, really good AGMs, the CII ones. We have a reputation of really having a good time doing some interesting, unique things at our AGMs. We've had but typically they'll open with a cocktail reception. The networking is a big part of our meetings. Then we'll have our annual members meeting the following day, and then we'll have a couple of days of seminars. But interspersed in the evenings or the afternoons, we'll have tours of the city or we've done tours of law enforcement facilities. We've done that type of thing. And then we've gone through the outings. 1 year in Chicago, we did what we called a blues festival outing, where we went to 3 blues bars all on the south side of Chicago in neighborhoods that you would not typically go into, but we knew people there and we were safe and sound in these areas, but they were a lot of fun. We actually took a bunch of people skydiving. I don't know if you knew Chris Brogan.
Yeah, of course I did.
Yeah, well, Chris was a big skydiver, and he had, I don't know, 1,000 jumps or some successful jumps. And so he arranged it, and we took 30 private investigators out for tandem skydives, and we called it jumping PIs. Set a record for the most PIs in the air at any one time. Still, Guinness wouldn't put it in the book.
They all survived, right?
Everybody survived.
Fantastic. So CIO will be celebrating its 71st annual conference this year, but we're saying it's 70 years. Is that right? And that will be in Chicago at the end of August. Details will be coming up on the screen now if anyone's interested. And then straight after that, the World Association of Detectives is celebrating its centennial, 100 years as an association straight after, and in the Windy City of Chicago too. Anything you want to add, Steve?
When I found out that WAD, the World Association of Detectives, was celebrating their centennial, I knew that was a big deal. And so I know the executive director of WAD. I've known Bob for many years, Bob Heelis. So I got a hold of him and said, hey, we don't want to horn in on what you're doing. We know it's a big deal for you, but if you think it might work, we'll be willing to host our meeting either right before or right after yours. So people could maybe attend, some of our members could attend yours, and that might want to, and maybe even some of yours attend ours. We wanted to be supportive of our brother association. So Bob said, I think he checked with you, Mike, and some other people, and you all thought that was a good idea. So we put it together right before yours. Ours ends. We're in a different hotel, but we're right down, like maybe you're at the Drake Hotel, and we're 2 blocks away from the Drake, or 2 or 3 blocks away from the Drake at the Sofitel.
Brilliant. It's good to get international investigators in the same city, right? Both associations doing good things for the industry, sharing knowledge and insight and growing the industry as it moves forward. And I wanted to bring this on to the next point. How do you see the trends moving? I mean, you've been involved in associations for 50 years, Steve, so that's a long time. And I mean, I've been involved nowhere near as long as you, but I've seen some changes already. And I'm wondering, I think it's important to keep the association's benefits and qualities for its members progressing. But how do you see that moving forward? I mean, there's so many associations out there now as well. And to achieve 70 or 100 years, the association leadership have got to be doing something right. But there's a lot more associations cropping up. I imagine there'll be a crypto association, an AI association. There'll be new developing associations given in the next years. How do we keep the associations that many previous leaders have worked so hard to grow and develop and keep ethical and professional? How does that move forward? What do you see?
One of the problems that I have seen with associations is they tend to get a little too tradition bound. I mean, traditions are nice, and it's nice to have that history. But the reality is, someone that's coming into the association today they're joining the association for a reason. Now, it could be a myriad of reasons that people join these associations. Some join for credentials, some join for the camaraderie, some join for networking, some join because they need people to give business to. Some people join because they're hoping to get business. So you have to appreciate all these different reasons people join the associations, and you have to provide them with what they're looking for. And if you don't, they're going to be gone in a couple of years, or they're not going to. So, and in order to do that, again, tradition is nice, but you have to be progressive in terms of like the things that you're offering them. Like we at CII, we just created, I think we're the only association that has it currently, and I imagine that someday the other ones will. We have our own branded app on the, so on their phone, people have access to all of the members' emails, instant messaging, or they can send them an email or call them on the phone through this app. The app also has a direct link into our website. So things like that, I think are important to be able to do. We just also, in terms like to sort of flying against the face of tradition, we just recently, for years, we had sort of a shield as for our logo, and we've modernized that type thing. So I think you have to recognize that you're not going to be forever there, and I'm sure maybe I'm the exception to that because it means like I have been forever. But I'm also recognize that we need to be progressive, and you need to move forward to make the association relevant for today's investigators. And if you're not doing that, then eventually you're going to die.
Yeah, good, wise words there. Make the association relevant for the investigators. What about the new guys coming into the market, Steve? What challenges are they facing now? Because investigations were different back in the 70s and 80s in Chicago. I can imagine I bet you've got a load of stories we could share over a couple of beers or whiskeys about the work back then. But what about the guys coming into the market now? What sort of challenges are you seeing the younger investigators face?
I think they got to, facing all the regulations and privacy issues that are out there are important. Information is becoming more locked down. Criminal records, which used to just were wide open in the states and through the court system, much less how we used to do it. But even after that got locked down, you could go down to the courthouse and do your research. That's getting locked down. More and more they're expunging criminal records or not allowing you to research them over 3 years. So a lot of information that used to be even in the public domain for people's concerns over privacy are getting more difficult. So I think it's a harder business to be in today than it was when I was first into it because of the regulations. You need to be technologically adept. I think you really need to, and it's more than just Googling something. I mean, it drives me crazy when people say that. Well, I can just Google that. But there's a big, and I think that the problem with people in the technology is sometimes investigators that aren't very good at their job mistake data for information. In other words, they'll find something on a database search or something like that, and that's to them the answer, but it's not. It's how you apply that data to make it relevant to your case, and then that becomes information. And then data really doesn't have much value. Information has value, and so that's the big thing young investigators need to know is the difference between data and information and how to apply that data. That's why I'm saying that sometimes talking to people is still a skill that I always considered it my good skill set, that I was able to talk to people.
Oh, 100%. We've got investigators now that try and crack a case from their desk without doing any field work, any interviews, like you say, talking to people and just getting the word on the street. It's just try and crack it from a database search where actually, to be honest, there's other parts of the investigation that are just as complementary that you need to do. It makes me laugh that you say data privacy in the US. We've always been, from Europe, found the access to data in the US to be incredibly wide compared to what, data privacy and GDPR issues we have on this side of the pond. So now that it's tightening up in the US, I understand what you're going through, because we've got a tough time over here in Europe too.
Yeah, I think actually from a public policy standpoint, I think it's bad public policy to tighten some of these records, particularly criminal records. First of all, the courts are paid for by the people. It's the government. The government doesn't buy them. It's tax dollars that pay for these court functions. The judges, they pay the judges' salaries. The taxpayers pay the prosecutors. They pay the public defenders. They pay the clerks that keep all this data. And it shouldn't be the government that only has access to that data. The whole concept of especially in any kind of criminal or civil cases, is open courts. That I can walk into any courtroom in the United States of America, barring, say, something about terrorism or national security, but I can walk into any murder trial, any armed robbery trial, any civil case, and sit down and listen to the court. And that's the whole concept of open courts. I can listen to the trial testimony. I can take notes sitting in the courtroom. And we don't have, in a democracy, you don't have private trials. You only have those. So if the trials are open, theoretically, the records should be open. It doesn't make sense to have the trials open, but not the records open to document what's there, particularly if the taxpayers are paying for it. So I think all this tightening down of that type of information is, to me, I understand birth certificates being tightened down. I get it. I understand adoption records being tightened. I get it. But not criminal court records and civil court records. Those should never be tightened down, because I think it's bad. It's bad for our business, of course, but it's also bad public policy.
That's a great point, actually. If you can walk into a court and independently view, openly document, take notes, then I agree. Why shouldn't court records be open source? I completely agree. So that's a great way to think about that. I want to talk about leadership. What makes a good, strong leader, Steve?
I think a number of qualities to be good, to good leadership. Being a good listener, being empathetic, I think is important to that. I think not being afraid to hire people smarter than you. I think being able to delegate. Those are some of the being, I think, recognizing that your employees are part of a team. All of those things that certain politicians, particularly here in the United States, don't actually have those skill sets, in my opinion. But I think those are some of the things. Probably my biggest failure, if I had one, was as a quote unquote leader, was I had trouble delegating. I always thought, oh, I can do this, or it's just easier for me to do it than to sit there and ask you to do it and get it done. Or I know I can do it better, so I'm going to do it. But obviously, like I used to tell people that worked for me in a supervisory capacity that, Ray Kroc wouldn't have built McDonald's if he had to cook all the hamburgers. But that was, so if I had one fault, which I'm sure I had more than one, that was probably my primary one, was I was not a good delegator. But that's me.
Delegation's key. It really is. I agree with you. And sometimes, the more you think you'll save time by doing it yourself, you probably will do in the short term. However, in the long term, you're probably going to end up going over and wasting time going through that.
Well, yeah, because you're going to do it again and again and again. Whereas if you delegate it once, you don't have to, it gets done. Then in the future, somebody will do it for you.
Delegate it properly, and maybe they won't do it as good as you, but set them up for control failures, and over a period of time they'll get it, hopefully.
And they may do it even better than you, because some little stuff you don't really want to do it, but you go, all right, I'll just do this. And so you blow through it, and maybe you're not going to be quite as diligent in reviewing, let's say running a database search and looking through it. You may just, because you've done it 1,000 times and this is the person's 10th time, they're going to maybe pay better attention to it than you would have.
Yeah, completely. And just to finish off, what are your view on mentors? Did you have a mentor?
Yeah, I had a couple. My father was certainly one of them. I did leave our family business for 3 years, and I went to work for a polygraph company out of Chicago was renowned at the time, called John Reed and Associates. They're currently have pretty much shifted their business now, where they do training all over the world on interviewing and interrogation. But I had John Reed was a good mentor of mine. And there was actually, you probably know his name, or maybe you even met him. No, I don't think you would have met him, but you knew his son, I'm sure. John Duffy out of Davenport, Iowa. I considered him. Yeah, you knew Mike Duffy, I'm sure. But John Duffy was a mentor of mine. I remember I had just gotten my polygraph license, and John had a polygraph license too. And John was 30 years older than myself, probably at the time. And he was the king down in Iowa of all of investigations in Iowa. And he called me up. I only had my license for less than a year. Did fun polygraphs, and John called me up and said, "Hey, I want you to come down. I got a homicide, an old cold case homicide. I want you to run." And I said, "I'm not ready to do that." I said, "That's too important of a case for, get somebody more." And I said, "No, you come down and do it." And as it turned out, it worked out well. I was able to get a confession in the case and put it to bed. And his trust in me and that kind of thing, and him talking, learning other things from him. He was a great mentor too. And that's what everybody needs.
So important in this industry, especially when we're changing. Steve, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today on Leaders. If anyone wants Steve Kirby's details, they're coming up on the screen now. Thanks very much, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.